Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Campos. I am really excited to talk to you all today about Istio and Kubernetes. I definitely my day job is I'm CTO at Alto, which is a ride-hailing company based in Dallas, Texas. We use Kubernetes every day for just all of our services. We also use a whole handful of serverless functions and many other pieces that go together very well to make a really good enterprise, globally spanning application that can just really scale and move with the speed of our business. With that, it's just over the last few years of working with Istio and Kubernetes, I've been just very fortunate. It's continued to build my excitement around it. So I'm excited to be able to share this with you. To kick off, one thing I want to call out is anyone that is starting with Kubernetes, feel free to use Google Cloud Platform. It's definitely the best platform for any of your Kubernetes work. With this, um, you can also use Google's $300 worth of credit and get started. So that way you don't have to spend a lot of money to get into it. You can then use, GKE, Google's Kubernetes engine. You can use CloudRun. You can use a lot of things immediately and get going. So if you've got expertise already kind of building your Docker images and pushing things up, you can get started with uh, Google Cloud Platform and Kubernetes pretty quickly. So to kick off, some people ask like, what is Kubernetes? What Kubernetes? Like, how does this work? Kubernetes is a way to orchestrate all of your containers into a system that will work well for you. Previously, whenever you were using containers, whenever containers became really popular, I don't know how many years ago, but it's starting to get back there. A lot of people would still spend a lot of time setting up virtual machines. They would then be firing up servers. They would launch their Docker container onto servers. They would then have to set up a whole system of IP tables so that way they could actually communicate back and forth between servers internally versus using external IP addresses. It became to be quite the undertaking for you to actually control and manage your Kubernetes or your system as it grew over time. So for what Google did is they started with a project called Borg and eventually released Kubernetes. Now the idea being that it can actually now make it where the system itself and Kubernetes itself is actually what's controlling your containers and managing your systems. What's really great about this is now you don't have to actually worry about launching containers and maintaining that they're up and running. Instead, Kubernetes will do that for you through a series of health checks, through readiness checks, through other means. It can actually see that, oh, okay, this container has gone down. Now let's actually spin it down and spin up another one to actually keep your system running. So that way, little blips in the system don't affect your system. On top of that, Kubernetes manages the actual nodes that your applications run in. Now, until now, I've been saying containers because that's what you're actually launching into Kubernetes. But once the container goes up, it actually wraps a container in what's called a pod. And these pods are actually living on nodes. Nodes are actually your servers that are running in the system. These are your virtual machines that are your compute engine instances within Google Cloud Platform. Your pods are your containers wrapped up in a nice system, so that way Kubernetes can monitor this. On top of that, what's wonderful is with Kubernetes, you can start saying, okay, you've got now 3 nodes to run on. I can control my costs because I know exactly how many nodes I'm running, and Kubernetes will actually space out your pods or your containers over these multiple nodes to ensure they're always running. So if you have bigger nodes or smaller, or if you have bigger pods or smaller pods, Kubernetes actually does the orchestration and moves things around to make sure things are always running smoothly. On top of that, Kubernetes will watch it and say, oh, okay, if you have a wasted node, you have a node that has no pods running on the system, Kubernetes can go ahead and spin that node down, saving you server cost. So if you end up actually having a lot of very small containers and a lot of very small pods, Kubernetes can actually choose to reduce down nodes, saving you cost, or including new nodes whenever new traffic comes in. So that way you're only really paying for what you're using, and you're not paying for a lot of overhead and a lot of servers. So it's very, I know that a lot of people look for serverless for that, but Kubernetes can also provide that to some degree, and making that nicer for you. So let's talk about your project. Your project's not a small project. If you're looking at Kubernetes, you definitely have more than just a few services running. You've got a lot going on. So you're connecting to BigQuery, to Cloud SQL. You've got external services. You've got Firebase. You've got analytics, push notifications. You've got all sorts of stuff going on. And within your Kubernetes cluster, you have a variety of of services running to support your system. From your payment processing, various scheduling, application management, just tons of stuff is happening in here, each of those being their own unique pods. So let's talk about Istio. Why am I bringing up Istio? Well, if this is Kubernetes and your system is a series of pods that are out there in Kubernetes, and they're being hit by your services, then this is Istio. Istio is the glue that talks between all your Kubernetes pods and makes it so they can work together. Whenever you hear of Istio, you may have also heard of service meshes. Service meshes are a way for you to, using networking, able to connect your pods and protect your pods in different ways. So let's get a little bit more into what Istio is and what it provides you, because now you know that Kubernetes is your services and your servers. Well, now Istio is going to be the networking between them. And Istio provides you four main topics that you're able to work with, whenever you're dealing with Istio: traffic management, security, various policies and procedures, and then telemetry data. We're going to go into each one of those a little bit in detail. I'm going to be a little bit fast, but you'll definitely get the idea of what Istio provides you. So first, with traffic management, what's great about Istio is you can control how your request is actually routed based on headers, based on content of the message itself. So what's great is you can actually start routing different traffic into different servers. On top of that, you can do fault injection. This is something really fun that we like to do at Alto. Maybe not fun, but it definitely makes it where you can test situations and randomly have faults happen, randomly make errors happen, or have it happen at certain percentages. This makes it so you as a developer, especially on lower environments, can test your code and ensure that you're handling faults properly and not just getting surprised by them when they're in production. Traffic shifting. Again, you can actually have two services running, and you can choose to start shifting traffic between one service and the other. So you can say, okay, service A gets 10%, service B gets 9%, and then over time start shifting that, 20/80, 30/70, 40/60, and shift your traffic for your services. You can set request timeouts. So if a service starts taking too long because maybe it's having some kind of error and having some problem, you can actually set it so that way your services at a service level, at a service mesh level, actually time out, as opposed to having to code all of this. What's great is you're going to see by the end of this presentation is that all of these features don't require you to go into your code and code these special features. Instead, they're done through configuration. It's a wonderful system. You can control ingress traffic, what traffic is actually coming in. So you can actually do IP allow lists and IP block lists, ensuring that let's say you have bad actors, you can actually just block IP addresses from the get-go, and they don't even hit your services. Or you can say only specific IP addresses can come in, allowing for ingress traffic from only specific areas. You can set up secure gateways with HTTPS. You can control the ingress. So earlier I said ingress and then egress. This is the data coming in and out of your service mesh. You can do circuit breaking. If you know that your service can only take 10 concurrent requests at a time, rather than actually overloading your service with many more requests as they start coming in, you could actually start failing requests beyond 10 or beyond whatever number you put in there, kind of ensuring that the services that do run always run optimally. And then finally, you can also do mirroring. This is actually the feature that really brought me into Istio. I really love it for whenever you put new services out there, where you can actually say service A is the one that your users are hitting. Service B is actually being mirrored. And so all traffic that goes to service A will also go to service B, but service B won't actually respond with anything. What's really wonderful about this is you can use this to test early on. You can see what real traffic looks like against your service, but only service A is the one that will actually be responding to responses or requests from your users. When it comes to security, you can set up authentication policies. So you can deal with all of your JOTs and your security tokens. You can set up mutual TLS, so that way services talk securely between one and the other. Authorization, so who, not just this goes hand in hand with your authentication, so that way it's not just who can access your services, but also what services they can access based on their security levels. And you can also do key rotation, so that way any keys within your service mesh can automatically be rotated by the system and not by you, again, adding that extra level of security. Finally, Istio policies that you can set up. So rate limiting, if you have external users hitting your API, you can actually set up rate limits, so that way user A can only hit 10 times a minute or 10 times a second, versus having to actually code all this. Again, set up denials, allow and block lists, so that way, again, people can't even get to your services unless you've explicitly given them permission. And then finally, with telemetry, you can set up a lot of tracing, metrics. Using Prometheus integration, you can actually watch all of these metrics as they happen using systems like Grafana. And then you can set wonderful service graphs, so you can actually see how all of your services talk amongst themselves. So how does Istio work? How does all this happen? So with Istio, as we know, before Istio, we had Kubernetes pods. And one pod would talk to another pod, and based on your internal URL, they would be able to communicate. Well, now with Istio, you actually, still with Kubernetes, you have pods, but they are, this is your container in a pod, and this is how they talk to one another. Now, once you enable Istio, your containers and your pods are no longer talking directly to one another. Instead, you're using sidecars. These sidecars are where all the magic of Istio happens. Now, whenever the container goes to speak out to the rest of the system, it actually talks to the sidecar, and then sidecars within Istio are actually the ones communicating back and forth between one another. These are extremely performant, and they're able to, and this is what makes all the magic happen, because now all of this traffic between sidecars can have various features and policies, such as a mutual TLS policy, which is controlled by the sidecars, and again, not something you have to code into your actual code and into your container, making this wonderful. Now, now you can start seeing with these sidecars how all of our telemetry can be sent off to Prometheus to report back to our users, all because it's going through the sidecars. And then finally, if you look even deeper into Istio, the way this all works is through an Istio control plane, which is allowing for your containers to talk to the sidecars. It's really not the sidecars talking directly to one another. They're actually talking through the control plane. But for you as a developer, it's all fairly transparent. But it's the control plane that controls all of your policy enforcement, your certificates, your routing. It all goes through this one space. And again, all of your systems are now able to talk to one another, but through a very controlled control plane, which is Istio. So you may be asking, what do I actually do? How does this actually work? Well, you're going to write configuration files. You're going to write a lot of configuration files. So before we get into actually the configuration files, let's look at an incoming request. So you have a request coming in, and the first thing it does is going to hit your fancy new Istio service mesh that you've set up. Whenever this Istio service mesh gets hit, the first thing it hits is the ingress gateway. This is actually controlling what is allowed into your service mesh. Anything coming externally is going to talk to your gateway first. The gateway then uses your configuration that you've set up through various YAML files or JSON files, and it's going to determine based on the host and the port within your configuration which gateway to go into. Once within the gateway will look at all its different virtual services that are within your Istio control plane, and it's going to say, okay, based on the various URI matching and other rules, we're actually going to talk to this specific virtual service. From that virtual service, we're going to then determine, do we, using a destination rule, which destination do we talk to? And then finally, which actual pod do we speak to? So as you can tell already, there's at least 3 different configuration files that you need before you even get from this incoming traffic to your pod. But because of that, you're able to easily tweak your configuration at so many different levels so easily. For myself, typically it's I just create those multiple YAML files, and they all are just kind of one-to-one from ingress, one gateway that controls all of my different virtual services, and then all the virtual service and destination rule to service are all usually fairly one-to-one. But if I need to, I can start adding in more configuration and changing things up very dynamically on the fly. And so these virtual services, they can control exactly which pod they talk to. So what about an outgoing request? How does that work? Well, you've got a pod with a sidecar trying to speak to the external world. Well, whenever you need to talk externally with Istio, you set up what's called a service entry. This service entry allows your application to actually speak externally. What's wonderful with that is you can actually set up allow lists saying that, yes, your service entry can go talk to Stripe or to Twilio, or to whatever external APIs you use, or you can say it can't talk to these external APIs. So by setting this up properly, you can actually make it where there's a lot of security, where a rogue developer can't go in and just start sending off telemetry or other pieces of information to a bad URL. Instead, you're actually blocking those right from the service mesh, and they don't even go out. It's again, just wonderful level of security within Istio. So we want to get started. Let's get going. How does this work? So whenever you're setting up a new GKE cluster, you'll notice that very easily you can use an add-on and tell Google Cloud Platform, when creating this cluster, use the Istio add-on. Immediately, Istio will be installed as part of your cluster whenever your cluster is actually starting up, making this just a very seamless process. What's great is then Google will manage your system, and it'll make it so that way you don't have to worry about additional upgrades in the future. It just works. If you have an existing install, you can go and you can update your cluster and set Istio to be enabled, which again will install Istio on an existing cluster. So when people are getting into Istio and I'm having these conversations, everyone kind of asks, like, what's the best place to learn? Like, there's a lot of features. What's the best place, and how do we get started? Well, I've got to say, Istio by far has the best documentation I've seen of any project anywhere ever. So the best place to learn is their docs. I could go one by one here and kind of explain each one, but really their docs are amazing. Each doc starts with showing you how to set up your own Istio instance within a Kubernetes cluster, how to add in one very specific feature, and how to tear it down. It is extremely well put together. Highly recommend you looking at their docs. And in a couple days, you'll be able to go through each one of the tasks. Each task takes 20, 30 minutes, and you'll be able to see how to set up each one. So again, highly, highly, highly recommend just go to their docs. So can you show me some example YAML files? Like, what are we really getting ourselves into? Well, you're going to see that it's actually pretty simple. So if you've looked at any Kubernetes configuration files in the past using YAML, these are going to look very familiar to you. So you'll see that if I want to do like weighted routing, so choosing how much traffic to route between one version of your application to another, this is what a virtual service looks like in configuration for Istio. So you're going to say the kind is a virtual service. And then whenever we start getting into the actual specification, we're going to start saying that the route destination actually has two destinations, not just one. Each one of them is the reviews host. And you start having, you now see that we have two subsets of V1 and V3. And we're setting the weight to be 50% between V1 and V3 within our destination. This is literally all it takes to do very complex splitting, where you could actually have an entire array of services and do very complex splitting between different weights across different services. You see, it's extremely simple. And again, it's nothing that you have to go into your code and set up all sorts of crazy randomization logic or watching traffic or anything like that. Instead, you just do this in configuration and launch it. So if you actually need to get your next service out or you need to change your weighting, you just push up the configuration and you've changed literally no code. You haven't had to push and release and test and deploy. You just change your configuration. So what if we were to do routing based on user identity? So again, you look at this virtual service, you go down to the specification of a virtual service, and you see that actually it's using a matcher, and it's looking, and it says if the end user, if the header end user property exactly meets the name JSON, then we're going to send JSON to the route of subset 2 versus the route for V1. So now, as you can see, I can actually set up early test users using headers and say that these users are actually going to V1 versus V2, allowing you to gracefully roll out new versions of your application to very, very specific users. And again, not having to change a single line of code, not having to go in anywhere. Instead, it's all done through configuration. So what if we're trying to mirror traffic? Seems really complicated, right? Again, this is the thing that sold me on Istio right from the beginning. So you have your HTTP service, and you're now able to look at the route that your HTTP service is supporting. And we're saying that 100% of the weight is going to V1. But I want in the route to mirror all of my traffic to my V2 subset. So now, again, without having to do complex coding, I'm able to split my traffic and send 100% of my traffic to V1. V1 will be the only system that responds to all of my users' requests, but V2 will also get a mirror of the traffic, so that way we can actually test that code before it even goes live. Again, you can start seeing how powerful virtual services are, and their ability to change weighting and control really, really makes it wonderful to work with Kubernetes. Because whenever you're using just raw Kubernetes, you find that the routing you want to have these features, but the actual coding would be pretty large. So again, Istio provides this for you. As some examples for something fun I like to show people is that this is a lower level environment within Alto. But you can see it right here, where with Istio, I'm able to actually watch the traffic of each different piece of my system. I'm actually able to see which service talks to what service, and you can see that very clearly from the chart. I can go in and I could look at individual services if I really want to. So let's say I look at this booking service, it's having a problem, double click into it, and I can start seeing that the vehicle position processor is actually the one having a problem talking to bookings, and bookings is not giving it any good responses. And on top of that, you can see exactly what level of errors we're receiving versus Soundtrack, which Soundtrack is actually having all good requests and responses. So this is all provided by Istio, and this level of data and communication is making it where you can see all of these features. Now, if I were to want to go look and see exactly how this plays out in Grafana, again, Grafana is backed by Prometheus, sending it all of the data, and I can start looking at all the telemetry. I can see all of the operations per second, how many are failing, how many are succeeding, and start looking at very detailed bits of information. And I didn't have to do any work to make this happen. Again, Istio and all of the telemetry that it collects between the services makes it possible where I can actually look deeper into all of this data. It didn't take me weeks and weeks to set all this up. It took me hours to get this launched, get this out, and start being able to reap the benefits. So we're definitely getting near to the end of time. I'm going to double check to see if there's any questions that we can provide. I do want to call out the fact that this is the very exciting start of day 2 for DDG Doha. I'm really excited to be able to speak to you all, and I want to push you all to fill out the feedback form, make sure that we can get both feedback from you, and there's a quiz with some wonderful prizes, so definitely check that out. And then, as always, if you ever have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to work with anyone and have some good conversations. So I want to say thank you. I know we're kind of getting to the end of time, and I'm going to go double check to see if there's any open questions. Perfect. Well, I know we're getting to the end of the time. I don't see any questions right now, but I want to leave myself open. If you ever want to reach out, you can. I know that all my various social media links were shared earlier. You can definitely reach out to me at the easiest way is probably through Twitter at John B. Campos. And it was wonderful to speak to you all. I hope that you guys enjoy your second day at GDG Doha and really keep learning, keep using Google Cloud Platform, and enjoy. Thank you very much for the time.